Hello guys, and welcome to episode 8 in my Godot C# how-to series. Today, we're going to create this stylized waterfall right here. And we will have automatically nice foam lines around the objects that pass through the waterfall, as you can see right here. The tutorial is going to take you as far as this. So this is what you will create. However, all you have to do is just copy and paste these guys and move them a bit around, and you will get this effect as well. Alright, so let's start by creating the 3D model for the waterfall in Blender. When Blender starts, click somewhere to get rid of the box there. Select everything, press delete, press Shift A and create a new plane. Press Tab to go into edit mode. Select these two vertices down there. Press E for extrude, press Z and type in -2. We can now select the two mid vertices here. Now press Ctrl B for bevel and pull the mouse up to get this shape, and then start scrolling the mouse wheel up, and you will get more loop cuts here on the surface. Once you're satisfied, click the left mouse button, and we have now created a smooth curve here. Next, select everything. Press G for grab, press Z and type in 5. Select the bottom vertices down here. Press E for extrude, press Z and type in -3. Press A to select everything. Press Ctrl R for loop cut. Then you will have the line in the middle here, and start scrolling the mouse wheel up. And we're going to add a couple of loop cuts like this. So press the left mouse button, and then press the right mouse button, and it will align everything in the middle for you. Select everything by pressing A. Now click on UV editing here to get this guy up. Next, here in edit mode, click on UV and click on unwrap. And we have now unwrapped the shapes, and right now they are aligned just as we can see here. We have the small checkboards here and the large big one at the bottom. If this isn't the case for you, it might be rotated. It might look like this. Then press R and type in 180 to rotate them. Next, press G for grab and press X for the X-axis, and hold down Control. Then hold down Shift and you can move this to the middle. Now press S for scale and press the X button and scale this guy to fit the window here. And I gotta move a little bit more on the X-axis to fit the square, like so. Now click on File and Save As. And I'm gonna save mine here in the temp folder as Waterfall. And click on Save. And finally, make sure you are in object mode and have your plane selected. Then right click and select Shade Smooth. Save this guy, and click on File, Export, and save this as wavefront.obj here. And I will save mine in the temp folder, and I have one since before. Overwrite this guy. We have now created our model, so let's go to the Godot engine and create a waterfall there. In the Godot engine, start by clicking on 3D Scene, and rename the spatial node to Main. Go to Scene, Save Scene, create a new folder, call this Scenes, and click on Save. Then click on Run, and click on Select Current, close this guy down. Next, click on Scene, New Scene, click on 3D Scene, and call this guy Stylized Waterfall. Now go to Scene, Save Scene, click on Create Folder, and call this Stylized Waterfall. And click on Save. Next, go to Scenes down here in the file system. Then right click the Stylized Waterfall folder. Click on New Folder and call this Model. Right click the Model folder, click on Open in File Manager, and copy in the waterfall file that we just created in Blender. We can now close this guy down. Next, right click the Stylized Waterfall folder again. Click on New Folder and type in Textures. Right click the Textures folder and open in File Manager and I will now copy in the textures needed. You will find them in the Git repository on GitHub. Like so. We have a texture for the water impact, a texture for the water fog, a stylized sand texture that I created myself, and a stylized rock wall, which I took from a tutorial on YouTube. You can now close this guy down. Next, right-click the stylized waterfall node, click on Add Shell node, and find the mesh instance, and click on Create. Rename this guy to Water. Next, click on Empty here on the mesh, and click on New Plane Mesh. Then click on the mesh layer again. Set the size to be 10 by 10. The subdivide to be 64 by 64. Next, click on Material here, and click on New Shader Material. Click here again. Click on Shader, and click on New Shader. And click on the shader. We are now going to reuse a lot of the code that we have in the previous tutorials here. From the ripple shader and also some code from the stylized water shader. So to save some time, I'm just going to copy in the code from these previous tutorials. Alright? We now have to create the water texture 1 and the water texture 2 and set up the parameters. Click on the water here again. Go to the shader params. And I'm going to set this guy to be 4B, 1A, 5E, E9. I'm going to set the color intensity to 4.31. Color saturation to 0.1. Going to water speed of 0.1 as well. The stylized amount to 2.85. 0.1 in ripple amplitude. Ripple resolution of 7.26. A ripple speed of 1.72. And the ripple ring size of 0.59. I set the water layer to be a new noise texture. The size of 1024. It's going to be seamless. And add a new open simplex noise here. I'm going to leave that at default. And for the water layer 2, the same thing, a new noise texture. 512 by 512. It's going to be seamless. I'm going to add a new open simplex noise. I'm going to leave that at default. Here we have the simple ripple effect now on the surface. So let's go into the shader code quickly. And as you can see, the variables are all reused from the previous shaders. Right here is the ripple code from the ripple tutorial. Here we have the stylized water function from the water shader. And we're animating the water as well in the same fashion. So if you want to go into more detail on this, then just follow the 2 previous tutorials. Alright. Next, right click the stylized waterfall node, click on Add Shell node, and add a new mesh instance. Rename this guy to Waterfall. Then click on Mesh here, and click on Load. Go to Scenes, Stylized Waterfall, Model, and click on the Waterfall OBJ, and click on Open. Here's our waterfall. Next, click on Material here, click on Empty, and click on New Shader Material. Click this guy again, go on the Shader, and click on New Shader, and click on the shader. First, we're going to set the shader type to Spatial, and we're going to set the render mode to Color Disabled, so we can see the waterfall from behind as well. We are going to have a watercolor for the waterfall, and just like the previous shaders, we're going to have the color intensity and the color saturation as well. And we're going to have 2 water layers on the waterfall, and we're also going to have a stretch Y factor, so we can stretch the water to make it look like a waterfall. And we're also going to have the stylized amount. So let's start with these guys. So the first function we're going to have in here is to animate the waterfall, and we don't have the water speed, so we're going to add that as well. And to make it look like a waterfall, we're going to stretch the Y here. So let's add the fragment function so you can see what's happening. And of course, we're going to add the stylized method as well. And we're going to set the color to be the stylized. And in order to see something, we have to click on the waterfall and set up some shader params here. And set down the watercolor. It's going to be a bit blue up here and a lot of transparency. We're going to set the color intensity of 6.9 on this guy. Let's add the water layers so we can see something. So click on New Noise Texture, click here again. This is going to be 256. It's going to be seamless. So click on Noise, New Open Simplex Noise. And we can leave the values at default. Do the same for water layer 2. Click here, click on New Noise Texture, click here again. Set this to Seamless. Click on Noise, New Open Simplex Noise. We can go up here to the parameters. I'm going to set the water speed to be 4. The stretch Y, we can leave it 4. And stylized amount is okay to leave 1. Next, we're going to add the transparency here and make sure these colors are actually doing something. So let's go back to the shader. I'm going to start by getting the screen texture. And we don't need to use the vector 3 there. So we're going to add a plus. We're going to add the mix here for the screen texture. .rgb. We're going to get the watercolor and multiply this with the color intensity. I'm going to apply this. And we're going to get the watercolor alpha here, like so. .rgb here. Okay, and we now have a transparent waterfall here, but we don't see that, so let's add a simple rock orb. So right click the Stylized waterfall, click on add shell node, find the mesh instance, click create. Let's call this guy rock orb. Click on mesh, click on use frame mesh, click here again, change the radius to be 0.5 and the height to be 1, so we're going to make it smaller. And we can move this guy up a bit. As you can see here, we can now see through the waterfall. Alright, let's go back to the shader. And up here, we're going to paste in the foam color, the foam range, and the foam amount. So let's get the function for this. And we can call it add water foam line here. In here, we get the texture for the water layer. We're going to pass in the UV. And to animate it, we're going to say time divided by 8. We will get the red and the green channel. Then we're going to convert this to a value between 0 and 1. We're going to multiply that with the foam amount. So in here, just before the color, we can say vec2 foam line equals add water foam line. And we pass in the UV here. And then just after the color, we can mix the color here with the foam color. And we're going to multiply this with 4. To get some more intensity on the color, to make it white, because we are mixing with the stylized color, which is changing the colors a bit. So we're mixing the foam color with the color, and we're using step here to control how much of the texture we are going to use as foam. So if we click on waterfall now, and click on the foam color, it drags up to white, you can see we have now some nice foam down here. And we have the foam range, so we can move this up and down. And we can set the foam amount as well. You can see we can change the pattern of this guy. If we crank this guy up, like 0.5, you can see we get a lot of this stuff here. And if we set this to 1, we can get this pattern on the waterfall. However, I'm just going to leave it at the bottom. So I'm going to go like 0.07 and drag this guy down a bit. And we might have to adjust this later when we are adding the water mist to this guy. So next, we are going to add 2 lines on the sides of the waterfall. So click on the waterfall, click on the shader, and to do this is really simple. All we have to say is that if the UV.x is less than 0.01, or if the UV.x is larger than 0.99, we're just going to set the color to be white, and we're going to multiply it with 0.5 to get the transparency effect here. So if I click on the stylized waterfall now, you can see we have this thin blue lines on both sides of the waterfall now. So we get some edges for it. Alright, let's open up the shader again. Next up, we are going to add this nice foam effect around objects that are interacting with the water. And this is taken from the water shader. So if you want an in-depth explanation of that, then you can go and watch the Stylized Shader Water tutorial I have here on YouTube. Alright. So first up, we're going to add these 3 variables here. The foam edge scale, the foam layer, and the foam far. And we're going to use the same foam color for this guy down here as for the objects that are passing through the waterfall or interacting with the waterfall. And we will add these 3 functions in here. And we also need to add a foam map. We can put them under the samplers here. Alright. So these 3 were explained in the Stylized Waterfall shader. So if you want more in depth, go there. And we will now plug them in here into the shader. So right up here. And we have forgot to add the color saturation from before. And in order to see something, we have to click on the waterfall. And we have to go down here to the foam map. Click on new noise texture. Click here again. We can set this to be 1024. Seamless. And click on noise. And new open simplex noise. And you can play around with the period and the things here to get different patterns on the waterfall here. So the more linearity you have, the smaller things are on the orb here. I think I'm going to go with a fairly high period, around 130. We can add some persistence as well. Something like that. And let's tweak the variables up here as well. Let's set this guy to be 0.35. The foam layer to be 0.25. And that looks okay for me. We can now drag the orb to the waterfall like this. Okay. Let's set a texture to this rock orb. So click on the rock orb. And let's click here on material. And click on new spatial material. Click here again. And we can set a simple albedo here. And go to the textures. And drag in the stylized rock. Like so. So we have something there. Alright. Now we are finished with the waterfall. So let's add ourselves some sand underneath the water here. Right click the Stylized Waterfall node. Click on Add Child node. Add a new mesh instance. Click here on Mesh. Click on New Play Mesh. Click here again. Let's set this guy to be 5 by 5 and a sub width of 30. Sub divide depth of 30 as well. Next, click on Material and click on New Shader Material. Click here again. Click on Shader. Click on New Shader. And click here again to open the shader editor. In here, we're going to set the shader type to be spatial. We're going to have a texture and we're going to have a deform. We're going to have the vertex function. That's going to take the deform. And to animate it, we're going to take UV minus time and multiply this with 0.04. And we're going to get the red channel and we're going to move the vertex.i with the specified height. So this is just a height texture that we're adding. It's going to be a simplex noise. And to see something in the fragment shader, we're just going to get the texture we are providing here. And we're going to draw that with the sand texture.rgb like so. So let's rename this guy here to be sand floor. And let's open up the shader params here. So for the texture, we're going to use the stylized sand texture like so. And for the deform, we are going to add a new noise texture. We click here again. Let's make it seamless. Let's add a new simplex noise to this guy. And we're going to leave everything at default as it is right now. But we have to move this guy down a bit. So if you press 7 on the numpad, you will get the top view. And you can now move this guy down like so. Now press Ctrl D and hold down Ctrl and drag this a few times to the side. And it's going to align perfect with the other texture. Like so. So this is the shore underneath the water. So if you look here now, it looks like it's moving according to the water as well. All right. Next, we're going to add some nice water mist to this guy. So right click the Stylized Waterfall, click on Add Child node, and find the particles here, and click on Create. And we can rename this guy to be Water Mist. So first up, we need a new process material. So click here, click on Empty, click on New Particles Material. Set a higher render priority, something like 11 on this guy. And in here, we have a lot of different parameters to set. Click on time here, and lifetime random is going to be 0.12. Before we go any further, we want to see something. So go to Draw Passes, click on Pass here, and select the new code mesh. Click here again, and the size is going to be 3 by 4. Then go to Material here, and click on New Spatial Material. Click here again. And set the render priority to 10 on this guy. And for the flags, we want this to be transparent. And we can also use vertex lighting here. That's all for the flags. Next, click on vertex color and click the checkbox use as albedo here. Next, we go to the parameters. We're going to change the diffuse mode to be tune. And we're going to change this to be a blend mode add. Color mode is going to be disabled, so we can see it from both sides. A billboard mode of particle billboard. Alpha scissors as well. I set this to be 0.28. And for the albedo, we're going to load in the water fog transparent texture here. And we can now move these guys up so we can see something. So right now they're emitting like this. So this is all for the settings here for the passes. So let's go to the process material again. We're not going to use a trail, but we will change the emission shape to be a ring. We're going to set the ring radius to be 0.2 and the inner ring radius to be 1.5. And we want a ring height of 0.1. And let's make sure the gravity, first of all, goes in the right direction here as well. So I'm going to set this to be 5 instead. And for the flags here, we want to align this on the y-axis. And we want to add rotate y as well. So then particles will rotate around the y-axis, which is up. And to align y, it will align the y-axis of particle with the direction of its velocity. And we can set c to be 0 here. And next we're going to go down to tangential acceleration. And we can type in 13.92 here. So things will start to rotate. Sorry, the z-axis should be 1. We're going to set this guy to be minus 60. And now everything is flying all over the place, but that's okay. And acceleration random should be 0.71. And to slow everything down, we can go up here to time. I'm going to set this to be 0.2 and a pre-process here of about 6.89. And we're going to throw down the speed scale to 0.1 and add some randomness to this guy, like 0.8. And we're going to have around 150 of these instead. So it looks like this now. And finally, we're going to go down here to color. And we're going to add a new gradient texture. So click here again, click on gradient, and click on new gradient, and click here once more. Click somewhere in between here. And we can click here on colors. The first color is going to be white and 100% transparent. So we're going to start with transparent. And then we're going to go here to white with full alpha. So it's going to be full bright white. And the final color is going to be white and with alpha channel set to 0. So they're going to fade in to white and fade out. So this is what it looks like right now. So what we can do now as a final touch is go to transform here. We're going to set the scale to be 0.76 on this guy. And the y-axis, we're going to leave them 1. And we're going to scale down the z-axis to 0.54. Like so. And we can now move this guy down to align this with the water foam there. So if you go to the waterfall, we can now adjust the foam range here. I'm going to set this to 96. And take the water mist and pull this down a little bit more. So something like that. Alright, so we now have some cool water mist going on here. Next up, we're going to add this nice effect that we have some rings coming out from underneath the water. Right click to Stylized Waterfall, click on Add Shell Node, select the particles, and click on Create. We can rename this guy to be Water Foam, like so. So let's click on this guy, put the time, and set this to be 1.86, and a speed scale of 0.1 to start with, so things won't go crazy. Then to see something, we can go to Draw Passes here, click on Pass, and we can set this as a new plane mesh. Click here again. Down here, Material, click on New Spatial Material, click here again. Go to Albedo, and let's drag in the water impact here to the texture. And we can turn off the water mist, so we can see what's happening here. We can turn off the waterfall and turn off everything, so you can see how things are going. Well, we can keep the waterfall on. And for the flags, click on Transparent here. Nothing else needs to be checked. And on Vertex Color, check Use as Albedo. And for the parameters, we will change Blend Mode to be Add. So you can see this white, nice, bright, shiny thing. And next we're going to go down here to Emission. And click Enabled. Change the color to be white. Next, let's go up here to the process material in the top. And click here on Empty, and click on New Particles Material. Click here again. We can set the render priority to be 12 here. And on flags here, we're going to take a rotate Y. And we're going to disable gravity, so set this to 0. And we can go down here to scale. Set this guy to be 1.8. Randomness 0 to 19. And then click on Scale Curve, and click on New Curve Texture, and click here again, and click on the curve. You want to drag this guy down to 0, like so. We're going to change the max value to be 2 on this guy, and dragging up to be around here, I believe. So now it's going to spread out from the middle here. And to fix this annoying clipping thing that it's going back and forth, we can click here on color ramp, click on New Gradient Texture, click here again, click on Gradient, click on New Gradient, click once more on the gradient, click somewhere here in the middle, click on the colors, and we're going to do the same thing here. Then we're going to start on white and 100% transparent. And here we're going to go from white, and then we're going to set this guy to be fading out, like so. And now it looks smooth. So if we now add back in the stuff again, we can now see that we get this nice pattern coming outward as well. So if we move the water mist a bit, something like that. And we can scale it down if you want to, if it's too big. You can confine it a bit more in the space. So we press 7 to see if everything from the top. This is how things are spreading out now. All right. Next, let's add a rock on top here to add some foam on the top of the waterfall. Right click the Stylized Waterfall, click on Add Channel Node, find the mesh instance here, click on Create. Now let's call this guy Rock for Top Foam. And let's click on Mesh. Let's create a capsule here. And let's click here again. Let's set the radius to be 0.2. And we can load the radius segments. We don't need to have a super high model for this. And we can just rotate this guy around the x-axis like so. Now we can bring him up to the top here. And we can scale him up as well. Something like that. So you can see we're now adding foam to the waterfall. And we can do a quick material on this guy. Click on New Spatial Material. And let's click here on the material again. To the albedo, and let's just throw in the Stylized rock wall texture here. Like so. So we got something on this guy. All right. Let's add a nice rock wall to this place as well, as a background for the waterfall here. So right click the Stylized Waterfall, click on Add Channel Node, and create a new mesh instance. And let's call this Rock Wall. Click on Mesh, click on New Plane Mesh, click here again. Let's set this size to be 5 by 5. And we can rotate this guy and stand him up. Hold down Control and drag the mouse down. We now have him standing like so. And we need to subdivide width and depth. I'm going to say 30 by 30 on this guy. Next, we're going to add a material. So click here and click on New Shader Material. Click here again. Click on the shader and click on New Shader. And click the shader again. We're going to have a spatial shader. We're going to have the rock texture on this guy. We're going to have the deform so we can get some nice rock formation pattern on this guy. And we're going to add a simple normal map as well. And in the vertex function, we're taking in the texture, the R channel, and we're going to move the vertex.y to apply the deformed nose texture to the height of the vertex. And in the fragment shader, we're going to get the sand texture, we're going to get the normal map, we're going to set the normal map, and we're going to set the sand texture. So it's a very simple shader. So let's click on the rock wall and set the shader params here. We're going to bring in the Stylized rock wall to the texture. And for deform, we're going to go with new noise texture. And click here again. We're going to set this to be 1024. It's going to be seamless. And we're going to set a new open simplex noise on this guy. Then we can leave these things as default. We're going to do the same thing for normal map. Click here again. I'm going to say click new noise texture. This is not going to be perfect because it's not according to the cracks and stuff on the texture, but it's just to get some visual effect while being a bit lazy. And we can use the default values for this guy as well. So we now have a wall texture here. It looks pretty neat. So let's click on the rock wall and let's make sure we align this properly. So press 7 to get the top view and select the move tool. Move this guy back by holding down Control. Here we need to align it to the edge like so. I'm going to press Ctrl D and I'm going to hold down Ctrl and drag this a few times to the side. It's going to align nicely like so. I'm going to select both of them and we can now move them a little bit to align them perfectly here. All right, so we have ourselves a rock wall. So let's move these guys up like so. So this is basically the shader for the waterfall. You can download the source code on my GitHub page. I placed the link in the description. And in that version, you will have 2 stories of the waterfall. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. See you in the next video. Bye for now. We can now select the 2 mid vertices here. Now press Ctrl B for bevel.